In this video we're going to be looking at the third part of the localized electron model. So remember that the first part describes the arrangement of the valence electrons in an atom using Lewis structures. And then the second part we looked at the shape of the molecule in 3D space. So the third part describes the atomic orbitals that these atoms use to actually share electrons and form bonds. So it turns out when an atom forms a molecule, it actually creates whole new orbitals just for bonding. And this process is called hybridization. And so hybridization only involves the valence orbitals, which are those with the highest principal quantum level that an atom has. So for example, in methane, CH4, the hydrogen atoms will use their 1s orbitals because that's the highest quantum level. And then carbon will use its 2s and 2p orbitals. And so since the p level is composed of 3 orbitals, carbon has a total of 4 valence orbitals to use in bonding. So here's the Lewis diagram and the shape for methane. It's a tetrahedral shape with carbon at the center. So carbon has 4 bonding pairs with it, so it needs 4 spaces around it. So to get a tetrahedral arrangement, the carbon undergoes sp3 hybridization. So it takes its 1s and 3p orbitals and it combines them to form 4 identical sp3 orbitals, which look kind of like a mushroom. And then these 4 orbitals arrange themselves in a tetrahedral shape to hold the bonding electrons with hydrogen. So these sp3 orbitals overlap with the 1s orbitals from the hydrogen and share the electrons. And note how these new sp3 orbitals are lower in energy than these original p orbitals, because remember, a molecule is all about getting the lowest possible energy. So let's look at the hybridization in ammonia. So nitrogen has 3 bonding pairs and 1 lone pair. So again, it needs 4 spaces around it. So since it needs 4 electron pairs around it, it will also undergo sp3 hybridization. So 3 of these sp3 orbitals will be used to bond with the hydrogen, holding those shared electrons, and then 1 sp3 orbital will be used to hold the lone pair. So next we're going to look at ethylene, C2H4, which you can see the Lewis diagram for here. So remember that a double or triple bond, we count it as 1 space. So each carbon has 3 effective spaces around it. So it doesn't need a tetrahedral arrangement, it needs a trigonal planar arrangement. So to get the trigonal planar arrangement, it undergoes sp2 hybridization, using 1s and 2p orbitals to form 3 identical sp2 orbitals. And so remember that the p level has 3 orbitals, so since sp2 hybridization only uses 2 of them, it has a leftover 2p orbital. So this leftover orbital will remain on the carbon perpendicular to the sp2 orbitals. And so it'll use the 3 sp2 orbitals to share an electron pair with the 2 hydrogens and then with the other carbon. So when we have an electron pair being shared in the space between the atoms where these atomic orbitals overlap, as you can see here, these are called sigma bonds. And sigma bonds are the stronger type of covalent bond. Now the other type is called a pi bond. And so you can see here, these red ones are the leftover 2p orbitals that were not hybridized. And so each carbon has one of these leftover p orbitals. And these leftover p orbitals can share an electron pair in the space above and below this sigma bond. So pi bonds are another type of covalent bond which are weaker than sigma bonds. And it turns out that a double or triple bond is always just one sigma bond and then either one or two pi bonds. So next we're going to look at carbon dioxide. Now, in carbon dioxide, the carbon needs two spaces. So again, since the double bond counts as one space. So it undergoes sp hybridization, and sp hybridization forms two identical sp orbitals which form a linear arrangement. And so in carbon dioxide, the C undergoes sp hybridization, and then each oxygen needs three spaces, one for this double bond and two spaces for each of its lone pairs. So the oxygens undergo sp2 hybridization, which forms that trigonal planar arrangement. So notice how the oxygens each have one leftover p orbital, while the carbon has two leftover p orbitals, since it only used one for sp hybridization. So you can see the oxygens, they're using two of their hybrid orbitals to hold a lone pair, and then the other one forms a sigma bond with carbon. And then each of these leftover p orbitals is used to form a pi bond. And since carbon has two leftover p orbitals, it can form a pi bond with each of the oxygens. So next is the trigonal bipyramid arrangement, which is 5 spaces. And so an example of this is PCl5. The phosphorus has 5 bonding pairs with each chlorine, so it needs to undergo dsp3 hybridization to form 5 identical orbitals. So here I only drew the phosphorus because it would be too complicated to draw all the chlorines. But since the chlorine needs 4 spaces, one for this bonding pair with phosphorus, that would be a sigma bond, and then it needs 3 spaces for its lone pairs. So we can assume that each chlorine in this molecule undergoes sp3 hybridization to form that tetrahedral arrangement. The last type is D2sp3, and this creates an octahedral arrangement of 6 hybrid orbitals.